it's time to sit back and relax with your favorite drink and listen. This is Why You Can't Go to Antarctica by Augustus Cordoba. Part 1. The wind out here screams like something alive, battering the glass of my cabin window hard enough to shake me awake. I'm Dr. Jim Latham, geophysicist, 5 weeks deep into hell aboard the naval vessel Asterion, cutting through the frozen black toward the bottom of the world. My fingers twitch as I flip open the dossier on my desk. Not from cold, but from the truth buried inside those pages. Sleep's just a fading memory. When I do close my eyes, I fall straight into the same nightmare. Endless voids under miles of ancient ice, and something down there waking up after sleeping for thousands of years. I wake up soaked in sweat, even though the ship's always freezing. The doc says I'm not the only one losing it. The rest of the crew is getting torn up by these dreams too. Even the Asterion seems to hate where we're headed. Twice now the engines have died for no reason, and the chief engineer just shrugs. No answers, just silence. Our navigation gear has been acting up, feeding us coordinates that don't make sense, only to correct themselves seconds later. And the radios? Static mostly. But when we ran the recordings through analysis, it wasn't just noise. There were patterns, structured, intentional. This morning the thermometer read minus 15 degrees Celsius. Through the porthole I watched the icebergs drift past like sleeping giants. 9/10 of their bulk hidden underwater. Just like our mission, most of it concealed, dangerous, and way bigger than anyone's admitted. It all started 3 months ago. I just wrapped up a lecture at Columbia on seismic anomalies near the poles. And that's when they approached. 2 men in spotless military dress, out of place and too polished for comfort. Oh, and they weren't there for a chat. Turned out the government wanted me for a recovery operation at Outpost 13, a cold little dot on the map, built during the International Year of Geophysics back in 1966. Well, it sounded routine, but it wasn't. I remember the meeting clearly. My students had just filed out into the cool October night when the 2 men appeared. The older one, Colonel Renham, introduced himself. His face was all war and ghosts, like he'd seen things that no one survived seeing. The other guy, Major Ryder, didn't say a word, just stood there scanning the empty rows like someone expecting gunfire or monsters, maybe both. Now here I am, 5 weeks out, heading straight for whatever the hell they buried beneath the ice. Something tells me it's not staying buried much longer. Your work on deep-sea seismology is unmatched, Dr. Latham, Renham had said, his voice like gravel. He dropped a folder on my desk, thick with classification stamps and warnings. Especially your theories on anomalous seismic echoes beneath the glaciers. I'd written those papers 3 years ago and got crucified for it. I'd suggested something massive was buried under the Antarctic ice, warping seismic signals in ways nobody wanted to talk about. The academic world laughed it off, called it faulty gear, bad readings, fantasy. My name became a cautionary tale, so I pivoted to safer topics and kept my head down. You actually read those blacklisted papers? I asked, letting the bitterness bleed through. An impressive background check. Renham didn't flinch, though, didn't smile. They weren't discredited everywhere, Doctor. In certain channels, your conclusions line up exactly with data that we've kept under lock and key from Outpost 13. And then, he dropped the bomb. Every last person stationed there, scientists, military, all of them vanished. February 17th, 1968. Gone without a trace. He slid a set of photos across the desk with the kind of detachment that only comes from seeing far worse. I flipped through them. 47 people, erased. No wreckage, no distress calls, nothing. At first, I laughed. Storms, equipment failure, maybe a radio blackout. I rattled off the usual list of disasters. Renham didn't blink. Then he handed me the audio logs. Final transmissions, the kind of thing that doesn't fit any known category of explanation. Something in those recordings twisted my stomach in a way I couldn't shake. Well, the photos told their own story. Aerial shots of Outpost 13, before and after. No damage, no signs of struggle. Everything looked untouched. Personal gear still outside the huts. Snowmobiles lined up, undisturbed. A weather balloon half-launched, frozen in time, still tethered to its cradle. Like someone had hit pause on reality. This makes zero sense, I muttered, narrowing my eyes at the grainy images. There's nowhere to run out here. Nowhere to disappear to. Exactly why we need you, Renham said, his voice flat. The last photo was a printout of seismic readings. Standard setup, nothing fancy. Recorded 3 days before the disappearance. I leaned in. The signal was textbook ice sheet movement. Quiet, clean, nothing strange. At least that's what it looked like at first. And this, Renham said, his voice low and flat, was recorded 12 hours before all contact went dark. The second seismograph reading hit me like a punch to the gut. I sat bolt upright, eyes locked on the page. The pattern was unmistakable, deep, rhythmic resonance. It's like the ice was humming, I said, unable to mask the awe in my voice. Vibrating at a steady frequency, but that's impossible under known glacial behavior. Well, he finished the thought for me. Well, exactly why we've been dissecting this for 18 months, came a new voice. Major Ryder speaking for the first time. It surprised me how soft it was. Signal repeats. Builds. Louder each time. And then, gone. Renham reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small tape recorder, the kind intelligence guys used to carry during Cold War drop meetings. This is the last transmission we got from Dr. Victor Meldrew, he said, lead scientist at Outpost 13. Time stamped at 3:26 a.m., February 17th, 1968. 1 minute later, radio silence. Forever. Then he hit play. The hiss of static filled the room. Then a voice, educated but cracking at the edges, panic rising like a tide. Command, this is Meldrew. The drilling. We've broken through to something. The signals were right. There's a chamber or structure beneath the ice. The ice around the drill site, it's not behaving normally. Henderson touched it and he changed. Something happened to him. And it's spreading. First their minds, then physical changes. We need immediate advice on containment. Biological... The tape jumped, warped by a burst of interference. Then Meldrew came back, but his voice was different now. Calm, flat, unnervingly serene. Disregard previous transmission. We understand now. It's not dead, just asleep. God help us. It's waking up beneath the ice. Then click. End of tape. I stared at the recorder like it might come back to life, and finally I asked, that's it? That's all, Renham said. No more messages. We sent a recovery team a week later. What they found matches those aerial photos exactly. Base intact, power on, gear still in place. But not a soul in sight. No bodies, no signs of violence. 47 people, gone. Now, as the Asterion slices through the cold belly of the Southern Ocean, those words won't stop echoing in my skull. That voice, that final broadcast. It's not dead, just dormant. God help us. It's waking up beneath the ice. I devoured every classified scrap I could get my hands on before we shipped out. Outpost 13 had been built under the guise of the International Geophysical Year as a celebration, supposedly to study ice formations and climate. Officially, the team consisted of 32 scientists and 15 military personnel. But what military presence? Way too heavy for a civilian science station. Something about it stank from the very start. The science team was a mixed bag, Glaciologists, geologists, biologists, meteorologists, and, strangely, radiologists and neurophysicists. That last part stuck with me. You don't bring brain doctors and radiation experts to measure snowfall. The classified files I got access to, once my clearance came through, mentioned a seismic anomaly picked up by satellite in 1966. Something big enough, weird enough, to justify building Outpost 13 right on top of it. What shook me more than anything was learning that a second team had been sent in, 6 months after the original crew vanished. No one told me that during the initial briefings. No mention, like it had never happened. What little remained of the records was redacted to hell, just enough to see that a crew was sent, some gear was moved, and someone signed off on it. No mission logs, no results, just silence. Now we've got Colonel Robert Reagan in charge of this run. Decorated war hero, specialist in cold weather ops. Looks good on paper, but the man can't stop scanning the horizon like he's about to reach out and grab him. That paranoia? Oh, infectious. The crew feels it too. Whispers, glances, everyone on edge. I first clocked Reagan's strange behavior during our first mission briefing aboard the Asterion. While going over approach routes to the site, his hand kept drifting to his left forearm, gripping it hard through the sleeve like something beneath the skin hurt him, or was moving. Well, since then, I've caught him taking pills from an unmarked bottle, always at the same time each day. He locks himself inside the comms room for private transmissions on a secure line. No one knows who's on the other end. But what really gives it away, makes my skin crawl, is how he reacts when someone brings up the missing scientists. He keeps the military poker face, but I've seen the flicker, a flash of raw fear. Not the kind you fake. Not from a man who's bled through war. 3 days into the voyage, I asked him point blank, "What exactly are we looking for, Colonel, besides the ghosts of missing personnel?" He stared me down, then gave a rehearsed response. "Our primary objective is to recover any surviving expedition members. Secondary, secure all research and equipment left behind." "And if we find nothing?" I pressed. He looked out at the sea like it might answer for him, and then finally said, "Then we find out what happened. Make sure it doesn't happen again by any means necessary." Well, the way he said those last 4 words, by any means necessary, left no room for interpretation. This wasn't just a rescue op. We were authorized to burn it all to the ground if we had to. Dr. Elaine Anderson came aboard from Woods Hope. Knows Antarctica better than most. Veteran of past expeditions. Smart, sharp, keeps it to herself. When I asked her about her last stint on the ice, she deflected, a bit too smoothly. Changed the subject like she'd practiced it in front of a mirror. That told me more than any answer ever could. I'd done my homework on Dr. Anderson long before we left port. Her published work on ice core analysis and reconstructing ancient climate data was sharp, brilliant even. She knew the geology of Antarctica like it was etched into her bones. But there was a hole in her record. A clean 2-year blackout from early 66 to late 67. No papers, no lectures, nothing. The exact window right after the Outpost 13 incident. Through some favors at Columbia, I pulled her personnel file. Redacted, but not enough. She'd been assigned to a classified polar initiative during those missing years. The dots weren't just connecting anymore, they were flashing red. My suspicions locked in one night over dinner in the ship's mess. I casually brought up a peculiar glacial formation near the Ross ice shelf. "Why, they call it the Cathedral," I said, my eyes on her. "Well, there is no such formation," she snapped, too fast. She realized it a second too late. The cathedral was real but obscure, known only to those who'd actually been to that stretch of ice. In trying to deny it, she confirmed what she wasn't supposed to reveal. When I pressed her, asked her where she'd heard of it. Again she deflected, said it came from a colleague's photos, but her eyes flicked toward Colonel Reagan, who gave her the slightest shake of his head. They thought it was subtle. It wasn't. Lieutenant Martin Hayes runs our comms. At first, his pitch-black sense of humor was a welcome distraction from the thickening dread, but lately his jokes have curdled into something darker. Maybe they found something better down there, he muttered yesterday. Something worth becoming. Hayes isn't just your average comms officer. I've seen him tinkering with the gear, swapping out standard components with high-grade experimental stuff that definitely wasn't listed in our manifest. Some of it looked custom. Signal filters, frequency analyzers designed to pick up something else, something not in the usual radio bands. I asked him about it, and he smiled like a man holding secrets and said it was all just backup systems. Antarctica's hell on comms, after all. But it wasn't the gear that rattled me most. It was what happened during week 4. He'd been logging background radiation, routine check supposedly, when the instruments jumped. A spike, right as a strange aurora twisted across the southern sky. Not the usual green wash, this was different. Alien. Instead of reporting it, Hayes scribbled notes in his personal log. Caught a glimpse later, page after page of prior entries, dates, times, frequencies. Notes like pattern recognition improving and frequency match at 94%. He's been tracking something and he's getting closer to it. Dr. Eddie Grant, our medic, is another one to watch. Keeps pristine records on everyone's health, physical and mental. Acts like it's protocol, well, maybe it is. I've caught him staring at me when he thinks I'm not looking. Eyes narrowed, pen moving fast, like he's watching for a crack to show. I asked him about it, but he brushed it off. Standard psychological monitoring, he claimed. But I've seen the look in his eyes. He's not just taking notes. He's expecting something to happen, something inevitable. Grant's medical record reads like a damn blueprint for brilliance. Harvard Med, residency at Johns Hopkins, published work on human physiology under extreme conditions. On paper, the man's untouchable. But out here, well, something's off. His gear's way too advanced for a standard field op. He's lugging around neurological monitors better suited for high-security research labs than a freezing steel coffin slicing through Antarctic waters. And the blood samples, far more than what standard medical protocol requires. He takes them often, quietly, usually after midnight when most of the crew's out cold. During my mandatory physical, he went off script, started asking pointed questions about my sleep. Not just if I was rested, but if I'd had strange dreams, specifically dreams involving impossible geometries and non-Euclidean structures. I asked him what the hell that had to do with frostbite or fatigue. When he brushed it off, said these kinds of questions were standard in polar psych evaluations, early signs of stress, sensory distortion, the usual excuses. But I've worked Arctic missions before. No one ever asked me about mind-bending dreams or mental contamination. Then I found his notes. He must have left them behind by mistake, tucked into a stack of journals in the ship's library. Handwritten, clinical, cold. Pages detailing how to track and document changes in cognition. Protocols for identifying neurological breakdown under exposure to something undefined, something alien. The terminology, nothing I recognized, wasn't from any medical handbook. This was custom-made, specialized, built for whatever this mission really is. It's not just Grant. Strange things started happening the deeper south we got. Part 2. The further south we got, systems began to fail more often. Navigation equipment spitting out coordinates that made no damn sense. For a few terrifying minutes, we were apparently traveling northeast while the sun was setting behind us. Then everything corrected, like nothing had happened. But the dreams, that's what gets under your skin. Vivid, hyper-real visions of something ancient buried in the ice. Endless black holes, cyclopean structures too vast for the mind to hold. And I'm not the only one seeing them. Half the crew's whispering about these nightmares. Well, the first major incident came 2 weeks in. Every chronometer on board, mechanical, digital, analog, stopped cold, all of them at once, for exactly 3 minutes and 27 seconds. Then they ticked back to life like nothing had happened. Engineering had no answers. Said mechanical clocks don't care about power surges, which means something else had stopped them. 3 days later, it got worse. The comms array picked up a powerful signal originating straight out of Antarctica. Problem was, we were still too far north to be within range of any southern stations. Hayes ran the analysis, said it wasn't a message, no voice, no data, just rhythmic pulses, a pattern that didn't match any known broadcast format. But I heard him talking to Colonel Reagan later, quietly and grim. "The pulse," he said, "matches the one from February 16th exactly." And the worst of it started in the galley. Someone had left a glass of water on the table, nothing unusual, until the surface started to ripple. Not randomly. These were precise geometric patterns, clean, repeating, like something was communicating through the liquid. Well, we ran tests using lab gear. The frequency matched Hayes' mystery exactly, down to the decimal, and it lasted exactly 3 minutes and 27 seconds, same duration as the earlier anomalies. Not long after, the ship's compass began to act up. Past the 60th parallel south, the needle started twitching. Not random interference, but controlled, almost deliberate movements. It wasn't pointing north anymore. It was pulsing in a sequence, like code. The deeper south we pushed, the more intense the oscillations became. Hayes kept digging into the final transmissions from Outpost 13, managed to reconstruct more fragments. The voices were broken, full of static, but some of the phrases still cut through. "The ice speaks. Not alone down here. It's changing us. Please understand, we had no choice." Then things got worse, like the ship itself had started reacting to Hayes' progress. Electrical systems surged and died in perfect sync with the signal's pulse. Hallway lights would flicker in time with it, as if the Asterion was breathing. In certain parts of the ship, the temperature plummeted, sub-zero readings, even though the heating systems were fully operational. Crew members started reporting voices, whispering from dark corridors, always just out of range, never clear, never close, but unmistakably there. And then came the water. Routine lab tests flagged it first. Microscopic crystalline structures forming in the drinking supply. Impossible geometry. Fragile shapes that dissolved when touched, only to reform again in perfect order when left alone. Grant ran deeper tests. The same structures showed up in blood samples from crew who'd been drinking the contaminated water. Worse still, they weren't random. The crystals were aligning along nerve pathways, like they were reading the body, learning it. And then the nightmares hit like a hammer. Mine always started the same way. Standing before a wall of ice, alive, breathing, pulsing with something that shouldn't exist. It's not moving physically, it's thinking, or worse, it's being thought. Something behind it isn't just alive. Well, it's too vast, too abstract, too unreal for the human mind to fully hold. As the nights went on, the dreams got more detailed. I'd find myself descending, falling through the layers of the Antarctic ice, each level a different era, the past frozen in perfect sequence. But the ice wasn't just frozen history. It remembered. The deeper I sank, the darker it became. White turned to blue, then to a black so absolute it should have swallowed light, but didn't. It glowed, a light that felt like a thought. At the bottom was always the same thing. The wall. Looked like ice, but acted like flesh. A vertical sheet of something alive, quivering with every step I took. When I got close, I could hear it beating. A double rhythm, one heartbeat, one brainwave. Aligned, human. And something behind it was listening. Something was behind that wall, not hiding, but waiting. It didn't speak, not with words, but it pushed straight into my head like a thought I didn't think. No language, just raw feeling. Ancient, watching, waking up. The worst part of it knew us, knew me, like it had been biding its time for this exact moment. I wasn't alone, others felt it too many to chalk it up to coincidence. Anderson saw the wall in her dreams too, same pulsing skin-like surface, same wrongness. Hayes said he dreamed of a radio that turned into every frequency at once, pulling in messages from nowhere and everywhere. Grant's visions were worse. People changing, morphing, after touching this black ice. Not dying, evolving. Their brains rewiring to handle data that shouldn't even exist. Structures made of meaning, not matter. Only Reagan claimed he wasn't dreaming at all. But the hollow look in his eyes and how often he slipped into Grant's medical bay told a different story. Well, we hit Outpost 13 at 0600 yesterday. Antarctic summer sun lit the whole damn horizon. The place looked untouched, quiet, still, like a photograph. The American flag still fluttered stiffly on its pole, frozen mid-motion like the wind had simply quit. Getting there had been a nightmare, not just bad weather. The ship's system said we were on top of the outpost coordinates twice, even though we were clearly offshore. Icebergs blinked in and out of the radar feed, massive flows vanishing like mirages, then reappearing miles away. It felt like the map was shifting under us, trying to throw us off. And then came the whales. A pod of orcas surfaced without warning, circling the Asterion in tight, perfect shapes. Not feeding, not curious, like they were following a code. Spirals, triangles, complex symbols I didn't recognize. When Hayes tried to record their calls, the sound equipment glitched, registering frequencies too high for whales, too structured to be random. Well, the birds were just as wrong. Flocks of seabirds formed impossible patterns in the sky, shapes that changed mid-air like living equations. Their shadows hit the deck and flowed across the surface like spilled oil, slithering against the grain of reality. And then, the sea parted. Ice moved on its own, opening a corridor directly to the outpost. No collisions, no scraping, just a clean path, as if something down there wanted us to come in. Well, sonar went wild, pinging off enormous geometric shapes under the water. Too massive, too deliberate. Not rock, not natural. We prepped the landing party while the station came into full view. A cluster of buildings forming a broken circle around a central hub. Outliers stood alone. Storage, backup shelters, emergency shacks. The whole station perched on steel pylons just above the ice, suspended like it didn't trust the ground underneath. Well, neither did I. Dr. Anderson was the first to spot it through her binoculars. "No snow," she muttered. "Well, that's not right." She was dead on. After almost 2 years left to the mercy of the Antarctic, the research station should have been buried under layers of frozen hell. But it wasn't. Not a flake out of place. The buildings looked almost untouched, like someone had been out here cleaning them up, keeping things tidy. But that was impossible. Even more off-putting, the wildlife, or rather the lack of it. In a place like this, structures usually drew in penguins and other desperate animals looking for shelter. But Outpost 13 was a ghost. No birds, no tracks, no movement, nothing. As we closed in on the shore, the instruments started going haywire. Compasses spun like tops. Thermometers gave readings that made zero sense, dropping, spiking, then dropping again. The radio to the Asterion turned to garbage, breaking up into static that, when we ran it through analysis later, matched those same pulsing signals we'd been tracking since we passed the 60th parallel. Then came the optical distortions, subtle at first, a shimmer like heat waves where there shouldn't be any. The closer we got, the worse it became. The station didn't look like it belonged here. It flickered, shifted, out of sync with the ice and sky around it, like it was bleeding into this world from somewhere else. And then, the silence. Real silence. The kind that doesn't just happen. Antarctica always makes a noise. Wind moaning across ice, creaks and groans from shifting sheets, the occasional cry of a bird, but here? It was like sound itself had been sucked out of the air, like the world was holding its breath. Colonel Reagan ran the landing with military coldness. Everyone was armed, even though the official report said no signs of violence. Still, something had spooked him. The front door to the station hung slightly open, a lazy drift of snow curling in. Somewhere deep inside, a generator still hummed, running after all this time. Inside, it felt like we'd stepped into a frozen snapshot of someone's last day. Plates with half-eaten food sat on the tables in the mess hall, iced over. Coffee cups still held frozen black sludge. In the sleeping quarters, belongings were left out neatly, like the owners had just gone to the bathroom and never came back. In the rec room, a vinyl record was on the player, the needle floating just above it, never quite touching. And then there were the clocks. Every single one, digital, electric, wind-up, mechanical, they'd all stopped. Same time, 3:27 a.m., February 17th, 1968. No logical reason, no power surge could kill a wind-up. Whatever happened here, it had hit all at once, and it broke time. Inside the comm center, the main chronometer, a rugged precision-built machine built to survive Antarctica's worst, it had frozen dead. His second hand stood locked at exactly 12 o'clock straight up. Same thing in the mess hall. Wall clock, second hand, same position. It wasn't just those. Every single timepiece throughout the base. Labs, bunks, storage. They showed 3:27 a.m. Second hands all aligned like they'd been given the same silent command. Dr. Grant tried to restart one of the wind-up watches we'd found. Everything inside was fine. No rust, no broken parts. The gears turned smoothly. But the second he let go of the winding crown, the second hand snapped to vertical and stopped cold. He tried again. Same result. Over and over. Like the clocks knew exactly where to stop. And then it got weirder. We found a digital clock in the backup generator shed. Red LED display, glowing faint in the dark. Time, 3:27. Date, February 17th, 1968. That kind of tech didn't exist back then. Shouldn't have been anywhere near this base. Grant pulled it apart. Its internal stamped with manufacturing dates from 1977. 9 years too late. This doesn't make sense, Grant muttered, turning the circuit board in his hands. This thing wasn't even invented when the base went dark. And even if it was, who the hell installed it in a place no one's been to in almost a decade? Colonel Reagan didn't miss a beat, though. His reply hit like a brick. Who said no one's been here since? That's when my own wristwatch, which had been working just fine, started acting up. The second hand would pause at the vertical for exactly 3 minutes and 27 seconds, and then it would tick back to life. Every watch we brought in started doing the same thing by the end of day one, syncing with the dead clocks like they were answering some invisible call. "Yeah, check for bodies," Reagan ordered, and for the first time, I heard fear crack in his voice. But we found none. No corpses, no blood, no signs of a fight, no hurried escape, just nothing. 47 people gone without a trace, like they blinked out of existence mid-sentence. The lab wing was frozen in time, literally. Microscopes still had prepared slides in place. Centrifuges were loaded with half-processed samples. Most disturbing were the ice cores, dozens of them drilled from far beneath the base. Strange black particulates shimmered inside them, like obsidian dust suspended ancient in frozen time. I'd never seen anything like it in all my years of geology. Then there was a scene at one of the lab benches. A coffee cup beside a microscope, still half full. Liquid inside wasn't frozen. It should have been solid in this cold, but it was, well, it wasn't water. It was thick, black, and sluggish, almost like oil. When Grant tried to take a sample, the substance moved. It slithered up the metal probe like it was alive, fast. He yanked it back, slammed the probe into quarantine, and didn't say a word after that. Neither did we. Part 3. The walls were lined with specimen containers, each holding ice cores stacked in order of how deep they'd been ripped from the earth. The shallow ones looked harmless enough. Compressed snow hardening into clear ice, broken only by the occasional bubble or smear of grit. But the deeper the sample, the stranger they became. The ice shifted from pure white to glacier blue, and then into a black so deep it didn't reflect light, it swallowed it. The deepest cores were laced with strange black particles, each one geometrically flawless. Cubes, perfect spheres, complex shapes with razor-clean edges, all arranged like they'd been built, not born. Under the scope, they looked too precise to be natural. When Dr. Grant ran a small current through them, they moved, shifting, locking into new patterns like they were reacting to him. One storage unit was worse. It held biological samples that didn't belong in any map of Antarctic life. Tissues labeled as native fauna looked like nothing that had ever walked, swum, or crawled. Under the microscope, the celled structures were impossibly complex, packed with organelle-like shapes that Grant muttered were engineered, not evolved. Dr. Anderson went pale as she flipped through the old research logs. "They were drilling deeper than they were supposed to," she whispered. "How deep?" Hayes asked, leaning over her shoulder. 2 miles, she said. Then they hit something. The ice stopped acting like ice. What does that mean? It means it behaved like something alive. The logs told their own story, one that slid into madness. The early entries were meticulous, measurements, diagrams, repeatable experiments. But as the pages went on, the tone shifted. Notes became tangled with speculation, strange philosophical ramblings, and symbols scrawled between words. Dr. Meldrew's handwriting warped, sharp alien glyphs bleeding into his once precise letters. By the end, all paragraphs were written in a script no human language had ever used, where fragments of advanced mathematics pulsed through it like veins. The medical records were worse. At the start, the team's physical exams were normal, human. But with each checkup, the anomalies stacked up. Slightly higher body temps, brainwave patterns shifting into new, unfamiliar rhythms, night vision sharpening beyond human limits. Neural activity spiked in areas tied to pattern recognition and spatial reasoning, as if their minds were being rewired for something they hadn't signed up for. When the last medical record, dated February 16th, 1968, was stripped to a single chilling sentence. No longer baseline human. Classification pending taxonomic verification. That was it. No vitals, no charts, just that line. While digging through the lab, Anderson found a false compartment under one of the workstations. Inside, papers and files that weren't in any of the official logs. This was the real mission brief. They hadn't come out here for exploration, not really. The expedition had been sent to investigate something buried under the ice, something spotted by classified satellite scans. The documents painted a different picture, though. Secure transmissions between Outpost 13 and a military command center. Their talk focused on containment strategies and asset recovery, not science. One folder held a map showing the exact drilling site. The placement wasn't random. No, it was laser precise, aimed straight at a massive spherical object lodged 2 miles beneath the Antarctic ice. That night, after we'd set up camp in the gutted remains of the station, Reagan finally spoke up. "Ground-penetrating radar picked up a cavity directly under this place," he said quietly, like someone might be listening in. 2 miles down, perfect sphere. Not something nature put there. We were the only living souls for hundreds of miles, but his tone made my skin crawl. "And whatever happened to the last crew," he added, "started with that discovery." We met in the old conference room. Dusty walls, frozen in time 1968 decor, our modern gear forming a little island in the past. Reagan laid out a set of radar imaging maps, the scans stark and ghostly under the lantern light. "This was first picked up earlier," he said, tapping the deepest scan, a flawless black circle cutting through layers of ice. "The tech back then was crude, but the void was undeniable." Well, the International Year of Geophysics had given them the perfect cover to build this station and start drilling. "Hey, how does a sphere like that form naturally?" I asked, though I already knew. "It doesn't," Anderson said, flatly before Reagan could answer. Her eyes locked on the radar image. At that depth, The ice would crush anything hollow. This was built. At that, Reagan's jaw tightened. They started as scientists, drilling ice cores, studying anomalies. But the deeper they went, the stranger he got. He slid a classified document across the table then. All sections were blacked out, heavily censored, and this was supposed to be the uncensored version. The black fragments showed up first, barely a meter down. Tests proved they weren't minerals, and they weren't meteorite dust either. They were built, manufactured, with a kind of inner complexity you could only see under an electron microscope. Grant stared at those magnified images for a long time, her jaw tight. These aren't just shapes, they're machines. Tiny machines with circuits, but nothing like I've ever seen. Correct, Reagan said flatly. Our working theory? These pieces are just parts, components from something bigger. Something that broke apart and scattered through the ice. Could be ancient tech or, He stopped, as if the next words might change the air in the room. A distributed intelligence system. Well, the thought sat between us, heavy as lead. As they kept drilling, Reagan went on, things started to happen to the crew. Their brains lit up. Sharper pattern recognition. Faster learning. They started having dreams, too. Dreams loaded with knowledge they shouldn't have been able to imagine. The theory was that the fragments were some kind of data storage units, and just being near them was enough to bleed that information straight into the human nervous system. Hayes had been silent until that point, and they kept drilling. They sped up, Reagan said, his voice low and bitter. The military saw weapons potential. Scientists saw the greatest find in human history. No one stopped to think maybe they were being pushed to keep going. Pushed by what? I asked. Reagan's hand twitched to his forearm, gripping it through his sleeve. By whatever's inside that sphere. The next morning we found the drill shaft. The massive auger was idle, looming like a monument over a hole too perfect to be natural, the flawless circle falling into pure black. Beside it, an improvised elevator waited, the kind you send people and gear into the dark with when you know it's not safe. We have to go down there, I said before I'd even realized it. Reagan looked at me for a long time. My orders are to locate and recover any personnel or essential research, he said slowly, not to repeat their mistakes. Anderson stepped in, voice sharp. Without going down, we'll never know what happened to them. We're scientists, Colonel. We came for answers. The argument dragged on until Reagan caved, well, sort of. A controlled descent, nobody alone, lines open at all times. Any weird effects, mental or physical, reported the moment they happened. We all agreed, but none of us believed we'd be coming back the same. Dr. Grant wouldn't let anyone near the shaft until he'd run his tests, full vitals, neural scans, the works. He leaned in close while the others busied themselves with gear, his voice pitched low so only I could hear. Your visual cortex is firing in patterns I've never seen before, he said, flipping the readout toward me. Same kind of anomalies we documented in the first team, before they vanished. A chill slid through me. So, what the hell does that mean? Grant's jaw tightened. I don't know, but it's in all of us. Whatever got to them, it's starting on us too. We went down at noon. Reagan insisted on taking point. Hayes and 2 soldiers at his back. Anderson, Grant, and I stayed topside, glued to the comms. The mission was bare bones. Quick survey, no samples, no extended gawking. The elevator was just a steel cage bolted to a thick cable, the kind of thing that looked one bad world away from killing you. Groaned under its own weight as they loaded in. Hayes wired a video feed to our station, but he wasn't optimistic. Past a mile, you're lucky if you get a picture that isn't snowblind static, he muttered, checking the lens. The last transmissions from the first team were 90% noise. Comms check? Good. Cameras? Good enough. So Reagan gave a sharp nod, and the winch kicked in. The cage sank into the black mouth of the shaft, swallowed by the ice. Half an hour in, it was quiet, smooth. The feed showed nothing but slick blue walls of ice, the occasional rusted scrap from the old drilling rigs frozen in place like bones in a glacier. Reagan's voice came through clean, calm, and on schedule. Then, right at the mile mark, it started. The screen jittered with bursts of static. The radio picked up that low, rhythmic pulse we'd heard before, a sound that seemed to crawl along the spine. We've hit the first particle zone, Reagan reported, tone still clipped and military. Hayes is taking readings. The camera cleared for a moment, long enough for us to see them. Black clusters embedded in the ice. But they weren't dead. No, they shifted when the cage's light swept over them, flowing into new shapes, as if taking inventory of what was passing by. Hey, they're key to direction, Hayes said over the comm, voice tight. Tracking us, and I think they're scanning. 1.5 miles, the cage jolted, then stopped dead. The brakes had engaged on their own. No fault, Reagan said after a pause. System's fine, it just stopped. Anderson glanced at the depth gauge and went pale. It's the same level, she whispered. The exact same depth where the first team reported their big find. She stabbed a finger at the monitor then. Look at this. The video feed cut through the static, revealing a single boot locked in ice. Empty. Frozen mid-step against the vertical wall, like its owner had been walking sideways and suddenly been swallowed whole. The ice had claimed it. Claimed them without mercy. But the boot wasn't the worst of it. The ice around it wasn't normal. No clean blue, no opaque white. It was alive. Thin, fluid streams rippled inside it, shifting like currents under a frozen lake. Yet the wall itself held firm, unbroken. Are you seeing this? Reagan's voice cracked, his soldier's head bleeding into unease. Yeah, we see it, I answered, my eyes locked on the feed. The ice, it's moving, but it's solid. It's not just moving, Hayes said, his voice low and careful. It's reacting. Look, watch. The camera locked onto a patch of strange ice. Hayes extended a gloved hand toward it, close but not touching. The currents inside shifted instantly, spiraling and coiling to mirror his every motion. Do not touch it, I snapped. Continue the descent. The elevator groaned back into motion after some coaxing from the controls. As it sunk deeper, the shaft walls grew stranger. More of that flowing ice, now swallowing relics of the old expedition. Tools, sample cases, a lone glove, a flashlight. All half consumed, suspended in the shifting frost like trapped insects in amber. Roughly 1.75 miles down, the feed fractured into snow and blur, clearing only for single frames. Radio chatter broke apart in jagged bursts. Structure change. Mooring from temperature rising. Dr. Anderson's voice cut in, disbelief sharp in her tone. Temperature at 40 degrees and climbing. That's impossible. Not here, not at this depth. The elevator shuddered, then dropped another mile before grinding to a stop. The static cleared just long enough to show what waited below. The shaft opened into a massive chamber, at least 100 yards across, with a smooth domed ceiling. The walls were inked with markings, sprawling in patterns no human alphabet could claim. And it was warm. 50 degrees, deep under Antarctic ice. No visible heat source, no explanation. Oh my God! Reagan's voice came through crisp for the first time in minutes. It's all still here, exactly how they left it. The lost expedition hadn't vanished. They'd built something down here, something still waiting. The chamber was packed with high-end gear, all of it aimed at one thing, the far wall. A smooth vertical slab of ice, nothing like the rest of the place. It caught the light in a way that made it gleam like brushed steel inside of frozen water. This is impossible, Dr. Anderson breathed, the edge in her voice betraying the fact that cracks in her composure had just widened. At this depth, the pressure should have crushed this place flat. Yet here we are, I said, my words bouncing around the strange acoustics. From the footage, the first team had spent about an hour combing through this cavern. They'd stripped their camp above and dragged it all down here. Lab rigs, commerays, bunks, even kitchen gear. This wasn't a field stop. They'd moved in. They were living here, Hayes murmured, his camera sweeping across the gutted sleeping quarters. Why trade solid ground for this? The answer was staring at us from the far side of the cavern, the wall. The equipment was set up like an altar around it. It was perfectly straight, perfectly smooth, polished like a mirror, but still made of that strange living ice that we'd seen in the shaft. Part 4. I'm heading up. Reagan's voice cut through, hard and final. Hayes, keep filming. The rest of your catalog what you can. We'll talk before anyone goes near that wall again. When the elevator doors slid open an hour later, Reagan stepped out looking like he'd aged a decade. Sweat glistened on his forehead despite the station's steady climate control. His left hand was trembling. The wall, he said without any greeting, isn't natural. It's built, maintained. Built? By who? Grant asked. Reagan's eyes darkened. That's above even your clearance. What matters is what's on the other side. You know what's on the other side? I demanded. How the hell? 'Cause I've been here before, he snapped. He shoved up his sleeve, revealing what he'd been hiding from the start. His forearm was laced with black, like veins but not. They pulsed in deliberate patterns, the same strange particulate that we'd seen in the ice cores, embedded under his skin like something grown there. I led the second expedition, he said flatly, 6 months after the first one vanished, and we found exactly what you just saw. The chamber, the gear, the wall. Yeah, we'd been down there 3 weeks before. Reagan stopped mid-sentence, his eyes fixed on the black lattice running under his skin. Before what? Anderson pushed. Before the wall opened, he said flatly. Most of my crew went to it. I was running the elevator, bringing down more equipment. When I got back, they were gone, and this... He held up his arm, the dark web branching and shifting like it had a pulse. This started spreading. He said he clawed his way back to the surface, escaped. Why the hell wasn't this in our briefing? I snapped. Because the military's been carving me up ever since. Reagan's voice was acidic now. My blood's their lab. They're building weapons, comms tech, offer whatever's inside me. This mission, it's not a rescue. It's not recovery. It's about getting more of this from the source. The air went cold in my chest. We weren't here to save anyone. We were lab rats marched into the dark to see what it did to us. After hours of shouting, swearing, and staring at the wall like it might answer us, we went on anyway, set up a base in the chamber. Reagan kept his distance. We took shifts watching the wall, cataloguing what the first team had left behind. Hayes got most of their tech back online, gear way beyond anything you'd find on a geological survey. But it hummed and whirred, a cluster of heavy-duty scanners locked on the wall. This is military hardware, Hayes muttered, hands moving over the controls like a safecracker. Screens came alive, feeding us waves of data that made no sense. Complex pulsing patterns looping like the thing on the other side was breathing. Low-frequency signals, Hayes said, his eyes narrowing. From behind it. He boosted the gain, and it hit me. Well, not a sound exactly, more like a pressure drilling into the base of my skull. a noise you feel in your bones. My vision swam, my ears roared. The pattern shifted on the display, and I knew it before Grant even said it. Brainwaves, but not ours, not anything human. The complexity was staggering, like comparing a child's scribbles to a cathedral. Then I saw it. Hidden in the noise were markers, timestamps written in the bones of the Earth itself. Extinction pulses, quakes, magnetic flips, all etched into the same signature. This thing, I said, barely above a whisper, it's been here longer than us, longer than anything, just waiting. Colonel Reagan's skin had gone ashen. We leave. Now. We can't just walk away, Dr. Anderson shot back. This could be the greatest scientific find in human history. This is exactly why the first team vanished, Reagan snarled. They stayed too long. They listened too long. Well, we ignored the warning, and over the next 3 days we built a research perimeter inside the chamber, rotating shifts to keep watch and run tests. The strangeness hit fast, and time began to warp. People starting a task only to blink and find hours gone, like the minutes had been stolen. Others caught warped reflections in the gleam of ice, not their own faces, but twisted versions, older, younger, just, wrong. Temperatures bucked between suffocating tropical heat and killing cold, yet the structure never cracked, never even groaned. The voices came next. At first, whispers so faint you could mistake them for the blood in your ears, an alien tongue bleeding out from the ice. By the third day, everyone admitted hearing them. They were calling from beyond the wall, speaking in a language none of us knew, but all of us understood. That's when Dr. Grant's routine medical checks turned ugly. He found something inside us. Microscopic organisms, nothing like anything in the medical records. When we brought up reporting it, Reagan shut us down with a violence in his voice that made the room go still. They already know, he said, his eyes dead. They're counting on it. The wall itself was changing. The flowing ice patterns began knitting themselves into shapes. Veins, nerves, lungs, like a body building itself behind glass. Even worse, it reacted to us. If someone approached with a scanner, the surface would reshape to mimic the machine's guts. Test blood nearby and the wall would bloom into massive cell-like structures. It was still learning. It was evolving, getting ready for something. The tension eventually boiled over. Hayes accused Reagan of holding back critical intel. Anderson? She was slipping into obsession, spending hours locked in a trance before the wall, palms pressed flat against it, whispering to herself, ignoring every protocol we had left. Dr. Grant started pulling blood samples more and more, his need to know drowning out the fear in his eyes. On the 5th day in the chamber, I found it. An old leather-bound journal crammed behind a stack of dusty equipment. The name inside stopped me cold. Dr. Victor Meldrew, lead scientist of the first expedition. And the pages told us what we'd already started to suspect. The military had picked up signs of something ancient stirring under the Antarctic ice. The so-called research station from the International Year of Geophysics, well, it was a smokescreen. Their real mission was to find it and, if necessary, lock it away. Meldrew's writing unraveled toward the end, each entry more fractured than the last. February 15th, 1968. The entity speaks through the rewiring of our neural paths. Not invasion, evolution. It offers something beyond human limits. Some have already accepted. February 16th, 1968. They're changing. I can hear their thoughts now, broken pieces of them bleeding into mine. They see the truth. It must spread. Danger coming from beyond demands preparation. Earth will need guardians who can see more, know more. February 17th, 1968. We will become the message. Integration begins at 0327. The unwilling will be given more time. The ice preserves all. When I shoved the journal into Reagan's hands, his mask finally cracked. He told us the truth. He wasn't there to save anyone, never was. He was here to decide if the place needed to be wiped from the map. Then he rolled up his sleeve, and the black veins were crawling under his skin, pulsing more than ever. "Yep, I told you I'd been here before," he said. "Second team 6 months after Meldrew vanished. We were infected in days, just like now. Yeah, I got out, but the changes came with me. Military's been keeping me alive, using my blood to build weapons. This is not a rescue, it's a harvest." Well, the room finally split right down the middle. Hayes fell in with Reagan immediately. Soldier's loyalty, no questions asked. Anderson's eyes burned as she fought for the opposite, insisting this wasn't a threat but a door to the next stage of human evolution. Grant hung in the middle, torn between medical morality and the law of discovery. And me? I was stuck between them all, trying to hold the line while feeling the pull of the wall like a tide in my skull. Whatever was behind it, it was calling. My sleep stopped feeling like sleep. No more nightmares. Now it was something else entirely. Visions, raw and blinding, flesh and metal, nerve and circuit, fused into forms humanity had never dreamed of. Knowledge older than our species crammed into symbols my brain could barely process. The black particles? Well, we'd been wrong about them. They weren't just alien microbes locked in ice. They were microscopic vaults, non-human tech coded to rewire their hosts cell by cell, turning them into living receivers for whatever was hiding behind that frozen wall. That night, while the rest of the team drifted into uneasy dreams, I stayed in the makeshift lab with the ice cores from the first expedition. Under the microscope, the particles shifted when I leaned close, responding to my bioelectric field, building intricate patterns that didn't speak in images or words, but pushed meaning straight into my thoughts. They showed me memories, but they weren't mine. They belonged to the missing scientists. Their fate hadn't been the nightmare we'd imagined. No screaming, no tearing apart, just expansion. Their minds dissolved into a collective vastness that had been watching Earth since before the Earth was there to watch. The wall wasn't holding a monster. It was sheltering something fragile, waiting for the right moment to emerge. When I went back to the chamber, everything had changed. The ice walls were alive, geometry and light flowing beneath the surface like blood through veins of crystal. And Dr. Anderson stood in front of it, her hands pressed flat, the ice rippling under her touch like it was breathing. "It's showing me," she murmured, not turning. "The threat, out deep in space, something that wipes out civilizations when they cross a certain line. It happened to them and they escaped here. And this is a guardian, preparing us." Reagan stepped in, his face like stone, heavy demolition charges hanging from one arm. "Step away from the wall, Anderson. We're leaving. This place goes under for good." "You don't understand," she shot back, palms still on the shifting ice. "They're not invaders. They're survivors, refugees, hunted for millions of years. They hid here to warn us." "Oh, I understand fine," Reagan said coldly. "They're playing you. Same way they played the first team. They need human bodies to spread. They're parasites." "Symbionts," Anderson corrected. "They gave us their knowledge. We give them our form. Together we're more than either alone." In the elevator doorway, Hayes stood frozen, weapon drawn but eyes flickering with doubt. Dr. Grant edged along the chamber wall, medical scanner humming, recording the ice as it shifted faster and faster, like the wall itself was waking up. Grant's voice was tight, almost reverent, as he stared at the scanner. "They're not attacking ourselves. They're rewriting us. DNA neural pathways, shaping our brains for something new. Millions of years of evolution crammed into a handful of days." "That's why we blow this place," Reagan cut in, his tone like cold steel. "We decide our own evolution, not some alien ghost hiding under the ice." That single sentence cracked what was left of our group's unity. Hayes snapped to Reagan's side, soldier instincts drowning out any curiosity. Grant hung back, his eyes flicking between fear and the impossible medical breakthrough hanging in the air. I stepped closer to Reagan, keeping my voice low. Oh, your arm, Colonel. It's already happening, isn't it? It's been creeping through you for years. That's why the military keeps you under a microscope. That's why you choked down those pills. He didn't try to deny any of it. It can be managed, he said, contained. But if we let this thing wake up, there's no going back. Before anyone could answer, the chamber began to shift violently. The ice pulsed faster, heat rolling in waves. The voices behind the wall rose in a chorus. Not words, but meaning jammed straight into our heads. Reagan moved for the charges, but I lunged, slamming into him before I could even think, and the explosives clattered across the floor. Hayes tried to pin Anderson, but she fought like something inhuman, her eyes glowing with the same shifting patterns inside the ice. "They're still here," she shouted between gasps. "The first team, they never died. They joined the signal. They understood." A bone-deep crack ripped through the chamber. The wall split, fractures spiderwebbing through the ice, and the opening poured light, thick, swirling, and alive. It wasn't solid, it wasn't liquid, it wasn't anything we had a word for. "Run!" Reagan roared, slamming his thumb on the detonator's activation. Survival finally beat out curiosity, and we bolted for the elevator. Well, everyone but Anderson, who walked toward the breach with her arms wide open, like she was greeting God. The fissures spread fast, crawling across the walls and ceiling until the entire chamber was webbed with glowing cracks as we entered the elevator. So, my dear friends, that's another favourite venue of mine for these stories. Either the Arctic or the Antarctic. Usually the Antarctic, because there's solid ground. It gives you a bit more sort of stuff to work with, I guess. I don't know what I'm talking about. Another huge recording session today, so the brain's going a bit wonky after that one. Anyway, so that footage was from a trip to Iceland that my wife took a few years ago. So hopefully that was a suitable backdrop for this evening's story, and I hope you enjoyed that one. So thoughts, feelings, anything you want to say about that in the comment section below the video, and as always I will try to join in the conversation as best I can. So back again some point in the weekend, probably Sunday. It's actually my birthday this weekend. Shh, don't tell anyone. I'm trying to keep it a secret. I just keep getting older every year. It's horrible. Well, that's it for the evening. Well, till the next time, sleep well. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story today. Really means a lot to me and to the author of the story, of course. Well, if you want to know more about me, I'm pretty much everywhere on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can download my music on SoundCloud. I've got a Patreon if you feel like. Throw me $1 or $2. Very much appreciated. And of course, on Reddit, I have a place where you can leave stories if you want me to read one that you've written. Well, hoping to see you all again very soon. Till then, sweet dreams. Bye-bye.